And good morning. Welcome to Morning Buzz. We had our little theme song with some construction going on outside, the true Morning Buzz. But anyway, it's day 2 here at Creative Week. I'm Adam Eisen, the membership director at the One Club for Creativity and your host. Last night we partied with and like college students from around the world at our Young Ones Students Awards. Was anybody there last night? Any winners in the building? Okay. Well, congratulations to everybody who won. Later on today, we'll have 2 fun rounds of portfolio reviews, filling our gallery with over 150 students and 80 professionals engaging in fast-paced feedback and networking. Tons of fun, but that's not what we're here for right now. We're here for Morning Buzz. We had so much fun yesterday, we thought, what the hell, let's do it all again. This time, hopefully with a few less technical issues, but a whole lot more construction noise. Today, we have a super designy episode for you. That's an industry term. First up, we'll hear why genderless design is a myth, and then we'll meet one of those Young One winners, a graduate of SVA and a young designer with a ton of talent. If you're at home, make some noise in the chat. We will get to a Q&A, and we have Mario over there with his eyes on it, so your voice will be heard. Well, it'll be Mario's voice, but your questions. And those of you in the audience, feel free to speak up. We want to hear from you. With all of that out of the way, let's welcome August Tang, design lead of Work & Co. Let's give it up.
Hey, how's it going? Good. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm super excited and really honored to be able to talk to you about this subject. So I'm August, as Adam said. Thanks, Adam. And my pronouns are they, them. I identify as non-binary and queer and trans. And I'm a design lead currently at Work & Co. So I wanted to go on a little rant before I get started. Imagine that you and I are going to Target to run errands, and you're like, okay, I need shampoo, I need razors, let's see, maybe I need deodorant. So we're walking in the Target, and we find the deodorant. All of the walls are covered in charcoal, red, and then the other side is like this light blue, floral, white, like pearlescent plastic coverings. And one side is like, for men, and the other side is for women. We're like, all right, I just want to pick a deodorant. And then we go to the razors, and it's like, okay, the same exact product, a razor for shaving hair, like one is black, and it's like men only in like green text. And then one is white or pink, and it's like for women. So my point is, like, all of these household like hygiene tools are gendered, and for what reason? Like, gender is such a social construct, and razors and deodorant and shampoo and all of those things that are arbitrarily labeled like for one person or for another person, it's just something that we've created. And so I wanted to talk about this. Genderless design is a myth today, because as we see like the binary in the products at the store, there's also been this trend of, let's start a company and make it unisex. Let's make something genderless. Let's cater to everyone. But gender is inherent to everything in this world, like because of those constructs that society has created. There's no escaping gender. There's no being genderless, because even if you say something is gender neutral, it's going to be perceived in one way or the other. And so you might be like, what does this have to do with product design? Work & Co is a digital product design agency, so we make websites, apps, anything that's a digital product. And gender absolutely does have to do with building websites and building apps, because everything is gendered. From like our clothing, for example, or even certain activities are reserved for like mostly men or mostly women. And so acknowledging the fact that gender does show up, whether we want it to or not, in the artifacts that we make, tells us that we have to address it in design. So for context, first we'll start just talking about like the current design landscape. And universalism is like a highly coveted idea and set of principles in product design. We're like, okay, we want it to be accessible, yes. Like in the 70s and 80s when universal design really took off, it was based in making architecture and infrastructure accessible to people of all abilities. But today, as we think of universal design, we're like striving for that singular solution. We're striving for one answer to solve many different problems, and that's just not quite a solve for the complex problems that we have today. So I'll give you an example. I found this article, 11 gender-neutral clothing brands for genderless style. So let's see what some of the quotes are that I pulled. Colorful unisex garments, coordinated outfits and activewear, androgynous basics, genderless workwear. I'm like, okay, I read all that and I'm like, I think I would love that. And then we look at the actual brands and it's just menswear. So I chose fashion as this first example because fashion is such a binary industry. It's separated between menswear and women's wear. And a lot of brands out there, like mainstream brands, separate their navigation, for example, by men and women. So it just goes to show, like, even if we call something gender neutral, doesn't mean that it is. And what we're saying with this fashion example is soft mask is like the default. So as graphic designers, product designers, visual designers, we've fallen into the same trap. We're essentially saying, like, with our designs, masculinity is the default. That's what we want to aspire to. And a lot of reason why that happens is also because of universalisms tied to modernism. So modernism and universalism, they kind of like rose to fame at the same time. And because of that, like myself included, in school and at work, we're reinforced that modernism is like the ultimate goal and it's the most like revered style and design. Like if you're an elite designer, you're probably a modernist designer. And so I'm not saying modernism is bad in any way. Like this is my portfolio. It's has some modernist aspects. But this is also my portfolio, and I think like there's a universe and a world beyond modernism on its own. So here's a work and co project that I was a part of. It's for Home Depot. It's such a beautiful example of modernism in product form. And then this is Harley Davidson's Special Collections website that just launched a couple of months ago. And these are both just really great examples of like Swiss design, modernism. We love like a big, bold, chunky type. And they solved the brief. They did that. But there is no denying that like the fashion example I just gave, these designs are more masculine leaning. They might seem like minimal and clean at first, but when you really look at like the elements, you have to acknowledge that, yeah, it's kind of like a masculine aesthetic. So getting into just looking at gender overall, I'm going to show you some examples of visual elements that can be masculine, visual elements that can be feminine. So first, as we talk about masculinity in design, there are some things that repeat themselves and create patterns of what we understand as masculinity in visual form. So this is Nicholas type. It's very Swiss, like we're using a sans serif that's super bold. Part of the UI is dark, which contributes to a feeling of masculinity. Like I was saying with the deodorant packages or shampoo, like a lot of products for men are dark and grungy. So in addition to that, like there's a really structured grid. Things are pretty restrained here and very utilitarian. And then when we look at a second example, this one is more of the same. It's just slightly more like brutalist, maybe a little bit more expressive, but ultimately like we still have that feeling of utilitarianism, structure, high contrast. And then because the gender binary is in place, a lot of those things I listed as perceived as masculine in visual design, the opposite is perceived as feminine in design. So this website, like one of my favorite type foundries, it is perceived as feminine because most of the backgrounds are these light pastel colors, light pink, tan, light yellow. The type here is also a lot more expressive, more rounded shapes. Things feel a little bit more delicate because there are fine lines. And we're also using organic shapes here, as well as a bit of like splashes of color. So this is a more bold example of what femininity in design can look like. And things that still make it feminine are, it's very vibrant and expressive. We're using like this kind of pointy, decorative serif typeface. And then I did want to bring a modernist example that feels slightly more feminine. This is a Work & Co project, or a Work & Co client, Aesop, the soap brand. And what contributes to the feeling of softness and femininity are these earth tone kind of backgrounds and color palette. The humanist sans serif versus using like Helvetica or something. And also the use of white space and just making it feel very open. So essentially, gender in design is like the worst manifestation of stereotypes about like humans. Like what if I said like all men are utilitarian and like emotionally restrained and like all these terrible, terrible things? Like that's just not true. And same with women. Like what if I said all women were like soft and nurturing and like loved flowers and things like that and just are like frilly and decorative? That just doesn't capture like who the people are that live today and how we express ourselves. So the answer for me is gender fuckery. In my designs, I'm always like, okay, death to the gender binary. I'm not going to use all masculine or all feminine design elements when I'm designing. And so my approach is pretty much mixing elements, bending, blending gender. It's a similar process like what I do with my own fashion or my self-expression. And so I do that in design by looking at elements and kind of doing an audit across those elements and being like, okay, how does this type feel? Does it feel more masculine or more feminine? What about color, white space, etc.? And I make sure that I have a good balance between elements that I'm using in my design. And if I don't have a good balance and I'm trying to intentionally lean more feminine or more masculine, that I have a reason for that. It's all about kind of like being aware that this is there. So let's look at some examples. First, I'm going to start with impractical examples, like this presentation, for example. Like I love committing slightly heinous graphic design crimes. And besides that, though, I think that impractical examples and experimentation lead you to a place where you can really discover new ideas and then pull them back and bring them into client projects. So this was a identity mapping exercise that I created for the queer employee resource group at Work & Co. And it's just like a crazy like queer metropolis. Things I labeled were like trans township, and I put like stars by it because I'm trans. Or yeah, like province of bisexuals, gay kingdom. I hope you all out there are gay. But yeah, this was just like a fun exercise of mixing elements and seeing how things could play together. And it was just interactive, like it was literally just a fig jam. So not a super heavy like design. No, it skipped forward. Hold on. Okay. So this was a book I designed a couple years ago, and the author and I wanted to push the boundaries of what it meant to build something that feels queer and feels genderqueer. So in order to do that, like I said in my approach, I mixed different elements. I'm using like this very utility monospace typeface along the sides of this book. And then there's also a highly structured grid. And I pretty much stuck to the grid the whole book. So it's very present. But at the same time, I use like a pretty expressive and slightly decorative serif typeface for the body. And then there are also just like wild elements throughout. So these handwritten notes with like little arrows and stuff pointing to the sections that they're relevant to. Shitty like rainbow trackpad drawings that I put over these cat photos. And so it was just like an experiment of mixing different elements and seeing how they can play together. This was really my first exploration of what it meant to create design that engaged in gender fuckery. So moving into practical projects. Medtronic is a Work & Co. client, and they create and manufacture medical hardware. So the products that we partnered with them to make was an app that would be used by hospital clinicians. And it was like doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, like all different types of clinicians were going to be using this app. And so we wanted it to be approachable and accessible to anyone. The other thing is these clinicians, they're super busy. Like they're looking at this app to look at patient alerts. And so we wanted it to be simple and restrained, but we didn't want it to feel cold and sterile. And we wanted to make sure that we had a balance of the more masculine elements, like just the minimalism and the cleanliness, but we also wanted to soften it up. So I'm not sure if you can see on the projector, but the grays here are actually like a purplish hue or like a purplish tint. And then the red for the highest level priority alert is actually like a pinkish hue. It's not like a true crimson red. And then this app was also, it was important that we had a dark mode because sometimes clinicians were using this app like in x-ray rooms that are super dark. You don't want to be looking at like a stark white screen. And so we decided to make the backgrounds of the dark UI navy blue. And that accomplished a couple different things. So navy blue is a Medtronic brand color. And so we were using like their shades of blue throughout the app. And that makes this app like much more recognizable. And then it also helps from this app, helps to keep from this app feeling super masculine in the dark mode. All right, let's talk about breastcancer.org. So previous to us partnering with breastcancer.org, the website was very pink. Like pink was everywhere. And we decided that we wanted to kind of figure out how to change the narrative from like breastcancer.org is only for women with breast cancer to breastcancer.org is for anyone. So this is just an example of going from something feminine and transitioning into something more inclusive. We kept some of the feminine elements in our visual design, so using organic shapes and rounded corners. Some of these icons are like expressive and they have color, but at the same time, pink was deprioritized as a color because of the message that it sent the users. Essentially, this website before was being like, only women get breast cancer, but we all know that's not true. Men, non-binary people, trans people can get breast cancer. And so we changed the message of what this entire site was saying by being mindful of how gender shows up in the visual design. And next I'll talk about a masculine product being transitioned into something more inclusive. So I worked with Traeger grills for about a year with Work & Co. And our team got this as the existing app. This is what it looked like before we partnered with them. And it was, I kind of think of it as like a man cave reincarnated in like product design form. It was just like very charcoal and dark. Orange was everywhere as like the highlight cover. The type was super chunky. And yeah, it basically was like made for men because all the photos were just men holding like these giant slabs of meat and being like, yeah, I barbecue. So we definitely didn't want to keep along that trend. And we were trying in user interviews to find out, okay, who else uses grills besides like the stereotype of like white suburban men? So we were interviewing, and the one that stuck out to me the most was this working mom who was a first-gen immigrant. And she was like, I'm crazy busy, but I cook home-cooked meals for my family every night, and I do it by using my grill. And she's like, it's easy to clean. All my family members have different dietary restrictions and different preferences. And on the grill, I can cook everything at once. I can cook a bunch of different things and then just close it at night and like it's done. And so she really showed us like the advantages of grilling for someone who wasn't in their existing target demographic. And I felt like that was enough reason to expand and change from what they had before. So in concepting, we tried to push them really far. We pursued directions that were more expressive and less about who is cooking the food, i.e. like white dudes, and more about like the quality ingredients. And another goal of Traeger's was to become less of a grill hobbyist tool and more of a culinary authority. So they wanted to like compete with Bon Appetit and like other destinations where you go and like you find inspiration for cooking. And we wanted to try and really push like the dynamism of this app by using colors and this variable type. We tried to really make like a serif kind of up in front so that we could balance out some of the more bold elements. And then we also even explored some directions that were more luxury and editorial. So of course, the client wasn't quite ready to go on like that extreme of an adventure with us, but we did land in a place that had a lot of wins for gender fuckery. So we landed on this cream background, kind of like an off-white gray, and we use color moments like the charcoal and the green throughout to just create emphasis. There are also a bit more rounded corners and overall white space use. So this app in the product, it's a grill. It's kind of always going to have masculine leaning implications. But by incorporating a solution that was a little bit more balanced and acknowledge like, hey, we know where you're coming from and we know where your existing customers are, but we also want to welcome new people into the fold. We did that by trying to create more balance in terms of the masculinity and femininity of the app. So I wrote an article on this topic last year. If you're interested in reading it, it's on Medium. And I posted it because I was like, no one's talking about this. Like, why is no one talking about this? I think about this all the time. And people were like surprisingly commenting on the article being like, gender is irrelevant. Like, why are we talking about gender when it comes to clients? Because unless it's like specifically in the brief, like, why should we care about it? And there's so many reasons why we should care about this. So first is, I touched on it earlier, but there are like awful gender stereotypes that manifest in visual forms. Like, for example, the deodorant example, like that, I'm like, who needs that? So the gender binary perpetuates harmful and inaccurate stereotypes. It just doesn't capture who we are today as people. But more than that, we're leaning on modernism as a default, or we're leaning on these like soft masculine aesthetics and saying, yeah, that's universal. Anyone can use that. But we're kind of saying at the same time, like, we're okay with masculinity being the default. Like, we're fine with patriarchy remaining as the structure in place. And then, if you don't believe me, there are also business reasons why gender fuckery is a good idea. And first is like just avoiding alienating users. So the Traeger example is a great example, or breastcancer.org. Like, do you want people to come into your store and be like, oh, this isn't for me, this is like only for men, or like this is only for a certain type of person? The same goes for websites or products. And so by opening up and making something more gender fluid, we can reach new audiences too. And then besides that, we can create also more sophisticated brands. Like, we can create systems that we've never seen before, brands that are just more interesting and complex. And ultimately that differentiates us from the competitors. And so all of what I said today, it just leads me to this final point that the future of design is gender fluid. Thank you.
Awesome. That was such a beautiful presentation to look at, am I right? We're going to clumsily get on these stools very carefully. First of all, I want to start with a question, which is, I mean, the whole title of the talk is Genderless Design is a Myth. Do you feel there's been such an explosion of awareness around the binary and how and the non-binary that exists? We're getting more accustomed as a culture to asking for pronouns. We're recognizing that everybody expresses their gender differently. Do you feel that there's a future where we're not defining design in terms of what is masculine and what is feminine, but breaking them down into more individual qualities, or looking at them in any other type of definition?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world, we just wouldn't impose gender on objects or on other people. People could just be who they are. But I think like this, I created this talk because it's undeniable that today, as things are, like, things are gendered and they're interpreted in gendered ways. So yeah, I would love if things became more about like the content and the expressiveness of who you are, or like what this is, rather than like how you perceive it in a gendered way. Yeah, I think it's just all about like how society is constructing gender. And I think that even if I do the work to unlearn like a lot of these toxic gendered stereotypes and gender roles, it doesn't change the fact that like the rest of society is still kind of participating in this system.
Right, and the design world is maybe always going to be a few steps forward from the rest of society that may not be so tuned in to some of the options out there. Do we have any questions from our audience? Yes. 1 second, we're going to run a mic over to you. Reed's coming. And I'll have you, if you don't mind sharing your name and where you're from before you ask your question. Here we go.
Hi, Mike. Here. Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, we can't hear you. Reed. You can just, why don't you just speak up and I'll repeat the question. Oh.
Hello.
Now we're on.
Down here, like you said, yes, down here. Okay. Actually, okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm in from Chicago with my classmates here. I actually use they, he pronouns interchangeably. I was someone that used strictly they, them pronouns, and I think the reason that this is connected to the presentation is because I present mask, I eventually went back to using them interchangeably, right? So this gender fuckery is very interesting to me, right? But we're talking about consumerism here, like you use the barbecue grill as an example. I did an essay as an undergrad about children's toys and how genderized they are. Do you feel as though, you know, you're talking about the design world is maybe a few steps ahead? Do you feel as though to get in touch with the general public and really, you know, get into this gender fuckery, that you have to like attack that mainstream audience first? Or do you feel as though it's about like kind of capturing these individual brands? Do you think, essentially I'm saying, do you think there's a systemic change by doing it like for freelance or individual clients? Or do you think it's really going to change if you like go to Target and you see gender fuckery at Target, you know?
I mean, I think that for me, I'm just starting small. Like I'm starting
Yeah.
from Working Co, which is like where I can influence the most. And I think I have no idea what it would look like for gender fuckery to like be at Target.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of just like about small wins. I always like joke that I'm trying to push the gay agenda at work. And like in a way, like I do take my identity into the projects that I'm assigned to, and I think about like maybe gender in a way that my coworkers wouldn't. And so I think, yeah, like I wish we could change the way that shows up in like mainstream products, but right now, like I just work with what I have.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I think it's hard to say like how would we do that, or like how do we envision a future that's free of like gender stereotypes.
Totally. A more specific question is that you had your 2-page spread, the book that you made. I really liked it, by the way. I saw that I'm an art director, and I saw that you used about 4 typefaces on that. I've known the rule of thumb to use like 2 or 3 max. Do you feel as though like gender fuckery is kind of just like breaking those rules a little bit too, or?
I think for that specific project, yes. Like for something like the medical app, maybe not.
Okay.
I think, yeah, we should always question the rules that we were taught. And like there is a reason why we were taught those rules. Like we don't want to overwhelm people. We want to make sure that there's like a good balance and that things are digestible by using only maybe 2 or 3. But I think in more expressive situations, like more typefaces could be used as like a thoughtful choice. And I think like a lot of the presentation is just like I list out the reasons why we were trying to be less feminine, less masculine, less masculine, more masculine. But those also were tied to like additional client reasons. So a lot of times like it goes hand in hand. It's not like we're just designing something to be less masculine because we want to. Like it was because we wanted to reach more people and not alienate people. So
Absolutely.
I think it's just like finding the right reasons to make those choices. Yeah, because I think like gender fuckery doesn't have to look crazy or like have to look like eclectic and wild. You can do it in subtle ways too.
Is it also ultimately about self-expression, or as, you know, being in a branding field, do you feel as though it was about the expression of the client?
Actually, I think neither.
Oh,
I think it's all about who you're building your artifact for. Like, who are you trying to reach with these things? So it's kind of not about me, and it's not about like the client as much. It's about like who they're serving. And I think, like I said, I bring my identity into the projects that I do, but it's only because like I allow my identity to give me ideas.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your questions.
And that was a whole conversation. Yep, give it up. Any other questions? Yes, Thomas.
Yes, thank you for you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, great presentation. I really get a good tip from your talk. So my question is, do you think the terminology genderless can be applied to other category other than design, like genderless music, genderless dance, genderless cinema kind of things? So if your answer is yes, did you find any good example so far?
Yeah, I think that at the beginning I talked about intangible and tangible things being gendered. So you gave dance as an example. I love dance. I love to do house dance and freestyle. But when I first started, I'm a noob, by the way. I'm like not good. I just do it for fun.
I think we're gonna need to see a demonstration.
the music on. So when I first started dance, I started in hip hop. I was like, I can only take hip hop classes because that's kind of like only what I'm comfortable with. But I realized as I was taking the classes that hip hop is kind of an aggressive style. It's very bouncy, like you're kind of like hitting really hard. And I just found like that doesn't really resonate with who I am. And a lot of I think the style feels masculine. And then when I switched over and I took like some street jazz classes, for example, or house is kind of like an interesting style because it was made by queer Black people in Chicago. So I think the creators of the style like have an influence over how it manifests in a gendered way. And yeah, I think like the whole reason why I gave this talk is because it can be applied across different industries, different activities. It's not limited to just design. I just like am so close to design and work with it every day that I wanted to look through that lens at this. But yeah, there could be so many other iterations of examining things like furniture or buildings, or yeah, like anything could be gendered.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of what we were first saying, in that it's really how we define our descriptors and learn those descriptors and how we're categorizing them. And instead of trying to put things in a pool, look at them as like a single quality on its own and how it balances with others. Any other questions out there? Yes, Sarah, right? Yes.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I was just wondering, we're from Book 180 Portfolio School, and do you have a go-to favorite typeface that feels very gender fluid to you that we could recommend to our students?
Type is a tricky one.
Yeah,
Because
it always leans one way or the other, it seems like.
yeah, like the VJ type example that I gave. VJ type is founded by a man and a woman, which I feel like influences a lot of how their work shows up. Whereas, I don't know, something like anything from like Swiss Foundry feels pretty masculine. But I think it's just like for me, when I'm looking for typefaces, I try to make sure there's like a certain quality of emotionality to the type. And if I do choose something that's like Suisse or something, or like Neue Haus Grotesque, something really like ultra modern that I know that I'm doing that and it's an intentional choice. So other than that, like I love Favorite, but that's like kind of a masculine leaning typeface. And then the typeface that I used for this presentation, it's literally Helvetica, but I stretched it like.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So for me, I think it's just like finding like the right type for that moment. Because sometimes like I'm drawn to very wild typefaces, but I could never use those in like an app for medical professionals.
Of course. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but it's all about the subtle qualities.
Do you ever find that when you are evaluating the balance of gender presence in design and you're talking to your team or with clients, do you ever get in debates over these qualities being masculine or feminine? Because some of what you say, I'm like, I could see somebody maybe interpreting something very differently from how you might perceive it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so subjective, right? Like, I was looking through all the examples of this presentation before giving it, and I was like, all of this is just like an opinion. It's all just like our perception. And so I think that's what makes it tricky to pin down like what is masculine and what is feminine. So I'm trying to think. I think at Work & Co, we were all on the same page that we were like, yeah, Traeger is like a man brand. And we have to change that.
I'm just going to pop it. Traeger has now appeared in 2 Morning Buzz episodes with completely different agencies, and there's only been like 10 total episodes. So like, if you want to sponsor or something, I guess get out that Traeger. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't think we had any arguments. It was more of like we were trying to push the client to be more adventurous, just because like there's this fear around, well, what if we like piss off our existing customers and they don't feel like they're seen and heard anymore. So I think it's just like a balance of what was before and what is after, making sure that like outside of gender, that like you're speaking to people who are there and people who are loyal, but also you're welcoming new people in. And I think that, yeah, like there were a lot of debates, but it was more over like, we're not ready for like a serif typeface because it's too decorative, rather than like, that's too feminine or something. Yeah.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Do we have one more question? Yes, up here in the front.
Hi, my name's Morgan, also with Book 180. My question was, in your experience, have clients ever come to you and said, we're looking to separate ourselves from kind of the masculine or feminine vibe we've had in the past and we want to be more gender fluid? Or is it usually you and your team kind of showing them what the future could look like and how they could bring people in by removing some of their gendered elements from their design?
Well, the motivation is usually like, we want to expand our customer base, or we want to reach new types of users. And so that's typically how the conversation is started. And then at Work & Co, like, we love to push our clients as far as they'll go, and try to present concepts that feel uncomfortable. And so I think it kind of naturally happens just through clients wanting to reach more people and us being like mindful of how can we design in a gender fluid way.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, let's give it up for August one more time. Thank you so much. For our member feature today, I'm excited to speak with and introduce you to Ariana Gupta. As you look at these next images, I just want to say, don't forget that she's only just graduating from school this week. Ariana is a graphic designer, a children's book author, a filmmaker from Mumbai, India. She has just completed her BFA in design at the School of Visual Arts in New York. In 2018, she released her book, New Age Fairy Tales, to introduce children to feminism, which sold over 10,000 copies. Woohoo! We can cheer for that. She's a TEDx speaker and an advocate for women's rights. She shot her first short film, Chandra, which is currently being screened at various film festivals. Also of note, Ariana was just honored last night as a Young Ones TDC winner. Let's welcome Ariana.
Thank you.
Isn't this work beautiful? What a celebratory, these tools are tricky, guys. They're really hard. What a celebratory time for you. You're about to graduate this week officially, and you just won your first Young Ones award yesterday. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
That's so awesome. You have a pretty specific and perhaps somewhat common with other kids artistic influence as a child. Can you tell us more about it and how it influenced one of your first major projects?
Yeah, so I think just like everyone else in my major, I used to watch a lot of Disney movies. Disney fairy tales were probably my favorite. And honestly, I thought I'd be working at Disney right out of college, and that's not happening. But I've always, not sure I want it anymore. But that was sort of where I started, and after growing up, right before getting into design school, I sort of started looking back at these fairy tales and also the books that I read as a child, and I revisited them, and I realized how problematic they were, because they were just messaging the same thing. I'm so glad August spoke before me, because I related with so much of that. Everything is gendered, and it starts the minute you're born. In terms of the toys you play with, the stories you're read, and I thought that fairy tales shouldn't be like that, and I did the next best thing, which was like, okay, I think I'm gonna write my own fairy tales, and that's exactly what I did. Growing up in Mumbai, India, I didn't even, have a lot of representation. I was reading stories with princesses who were from like these Western nations, and I didn't see any color. And so I decided to make like Indian princesses. And so I wrote 5 stories, and that's kind of what led me to it. And it was an amazing experience because once I put the book out in the world, I saw how children responded to it, but then I also saw how adults responded to it. And I think the happiest moment for me was when moms would come up to me and tell me, I wish I read that growing up and I wish I had that. And I think that's when I realized that design sort of has this power to change people and touch people's lives in ways that you wouldn't imagine. And that kind of just led me here.
That's incredible. That's all even before she started school. So then through your studies, what parts of design are you most intrigued by and interested in pursuing?
I think book design's always going to be my first love. And that's something that I've continued to do throughout college. I have branched out a little bit. I do branding now. So that's something that I'm more excited about. Definitely love typography. I want to learn more about how to draw my own letter forms. But I guess editorial, book design, and branding is sort of what I enjoyed the most at school.
Incredible. And you've also dabbled in some film, correct?
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. I managed to have the opportunity to sort of take this film class with Bob Giraldi at SVA, and that 1 year of filmmaking changed how I view a lot of things, and it was a lot of fun. Being in school, a lot of the times, especially in design, we're working on ourselves and we're working alone, which isn't a bad thing because we need to get better, I guess, before we can collaborate with people. But oh my God, for film, you need a whole village. You need so many people to make that one thing happen. And I think I learned so much about working with people, dealing with people, difficult people. But mostly it was a pleasant experience. And I'm so glad that I had that while I was still in school.
That's amazing. We're actually going to take a quick look at Ariana's trailer for the film that she created, because if you thought she was a fantastic graphic designer, you should see her very first film. Let's take a look.
Husband's monument to his late wife. That's a wonderful story. You don't mind if I record our interview?
No, please go ahead.
What do you think she was feeling when you took this photo?
She had to be happy. She was happy.
You broke my heart.
First film, guys. Look at that lighting shot of like the light over the photo. So beautiful.
Yeah, it was my crew. Hands down, they were the best people to work with.
It's incredible. What kind of answered why you enjoyed that the most? So let's move on. So feminism and women's rights come up often in your bio, and as I've gotten to know you. Do you think creativity, design, and filmmaking are important vehicles to shed light on important topics such as these?
Definitely. And I've seen this firsthand with the things that I have made. I think design has this like special power because we're, like August said before, we're helping brands change what's been done before. And we're sort of like leading the way in terms of the possibilities of things that can be. And I think that's why art is so powerful, because people can read things and people can see things, but I feel like art touches your heart, which is why I think design and film are always going to be the most powerful tools to talk about things that matter and to lead to any change. So, yeah.
Amazing. Now that school's done, let's talk career. Do you have a dream job in mind?
I do. I would love to work at the New York Times Magazine. But I don't know, maybe one day I'll get an opportunity, but that's what I have my eyes on.
Anybody have any connections? Let's tie things back to your family. Your sister's about to start at SVA also, right?
She is.
Incredible. Do you have any words of wisdom for her or any other of the students watching?
Yeah, I guess from just my own experience, never take no for an answer. I think it's brought me where I am today. And this is something I picked up from my dad. If you're scared of taking a risk ever, just ask yourself, well, what's the worst that can happen? And if you think you can handle the worst, then you should go ahead and do it, because you'll be fine.
Those are some great words. Well, Ariana, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
It's been
Adil.
incredible to get to know you. Yes, let's give it up. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, folks. Well, that's a wrap on this Morning Buzz episode. We're going to get busy with some portfolio reviews here in about an hour. So we'll see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. when Adam Litke and Jesse Suchman tell us how they built a completely regenerative production set. And I'll interview David Barnett, a founder of Noble Signs. I'll see you then. Thank you.